President, I rise to talk about President Trump's tariffs and how they are ruining confidence in our economy. They're raising prices on all of our families, and they're hitting our allies for no reason. Now, we all know that tariffs, they can be a useful tool to protect critical American manufacturing and combat our enemies. Targeted tariffs on adversaries like communist China or Iran can actually work to our advantage. And it is natural. It's natural for us to have trade deficits with countries that have smaller economies because really they just can't afford to pay for quality American goods. We are always going to buy more cheap goods from less wealthy countries than they are going to be able to buy from us. Even my Republican colleagues have acknowledged this. This is why President Trump's blanket tariffs, they just make no sense. They have no legitimate economic basis. And the formula that he used to impose these blanket tariffs are nonsensical. We know this because President Trump has imposed tariffs on islands uninhabited by humans and on one of the United States' own military bases. But probably the most egregious error in President Trump's tariff plan was punishing our allies, Israel and Ukraine. Both these countries are currently under attack. They need the United States to be standing with them, not hitting them with nonsensical tariffs that could cause them even more harm. Meanwhile, our adversary and the initiator of the war in Ukraine, Russia, is getting no tariffs. Our adversary, North Korea, is getting no tariffs. And while our ally, Israel, got slapped initially with a 17% tariff, even though we maintain a free trade agreement with them, their adversary, Iran, got tariffed at a mere 10%. Now, I will admit, as I'm sitting here right now, I just saw that Donald Trump changed his mind again and is telling countries around the world they now have to have a 10% tariff. He just made a major trade decision and action via a tweet as I was sitting here to provide and stand with Israel and Ukraine. Let me just say, those actions by this administration are just bad for our economy, it's outrageous, and it is bad for the United States' credibility. It is just clear there was very little thought put into President Trump's major, potentially catastrophic gamble with the global economy. He did this without any advice and consent from Congress, and that was a mistake. It was a mistake that our allies in need of aid are paying the price for. Now, we have an opportunity to rectify a small part of this error right now and exempt Israel and Ukraine from these oppressive tariffs that could do significant damage to their already hurting economies. Really, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. It's a national security issue. So let's come together and protect our allies who rely on our help from these harmful tariffs, and I hope my Republican colleagues can join me. So, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S. 1364, that the bill be considered, read 3 times, and pass, and the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Ohio.
Reserving the right to object. I want think about some numbers. 5 years old when I came to this country from South America. 18 when I became a citizen. Since that time, there's been 10 presidents of the United States of America. Only one that actually had the guts and the courage to stand up for working Americans. We've lost 90,000 factories in this country. If you take the logic of my colleague, then let's shut down all of our factories and send manufacturing to the lowest wage countries on earth that employ slave wages, that have massive government subsidies, and gut out what's left of the American manufacturing ecosystem. Of course, that's completely illogical, but that's almost what we've done over the last 4 to 5 decades. You drive through Ohio. Dayton was the computing capital of the world. You go to Toledo, was the glass capital of the world. Youngstown, the steel capital of America. Akron, the rubber capital of the world. Today, these cities are working to get past what they've gone through. But as I went on a campaign trail against a Democrat that always claimed to be on the side of the working man, but then saw what their policies enacted, we beat him soundly. And I urge my Democrat colleagues to go back to your original North Star. The point of the Democrat Party for decades, as far as I knew, was that you were for the working men and women of this country. But that's not the Democrat Party today. They're the party of electric vehicle mandates, against tariffs, against fringe social issues. And if we want to talk about the specific resolution, look, there is no greater ally ever in the history of the United States of America with Israel than President Donald J. Trump. Every single Republican last week voted against Bernie Sanders' resolution to block arms sales to Israel. 15 Democrats voted to kneecap them while in the middle of a war. So when we talk about Israel, they've already negotiated a situation with President Trump. So let's talk about Ukraine. This is a country that both sides of the aisle, shockingly to me, quite honestly, have given hundreds of billions of dollars to this country of Ukraine, where we have enormous needs in our country. What do we get in return? They impose a tax of 20% or more on our goods when we send there. Think about that. I just want to repeat that. We sent them hundreds of billions of dollars in aid. And then when we send them our products, they add a tax on our imports. Look, President Trump is doing a masterful job of negotiating with countries and with companies to finally do what should have been done a long time ago, which is to rebuild this country from the inside out. So for the reasons that President Trump laid out last week, that we're going to rebuild this country with American hands, with American hearts, and with American pride, it is with that sentiment that I therefore object.
The objection is heard.
Mr.
The
President.
senator from Nevada.
I appreciate my colleague being here to object. I don't think he actually read the resolution. The really focus was on how we address the tariffs against Israel and Ukraine. I appreciate his partisan argument, but I think he also neglected to represent that there were Democrats that opposed Bernie Sanders' bill, and I was one of them. I think it is important we work in a bipartisan way to move this country forward. I am also a Democrat that supports bringing manufacturing back to my state. You're welcome to come to Nevada anytime and see what we have done around the work that is essential. I think what I'm looking for in this time is common sense, working across the aisle where we see it to show the American public that, yes, we can still function and work together moving forward. I think it is important we stand with Israel at all levels, including ensuring that they're not tariffed. There's no tariff against them. It's very, very simple here. And I think targeted tariffs make sense. So I don't quite understand the continued partisan conversation here. But at the end of the day, I am hopeful that many of my colleagues still want to work in a bipartisan way on issues that reflect not only who we are as a country, but still working to address protection for our allies and at the same time protecting our economy. So I am disappointed in the objection today, and I yield the floor.
The senator from Ohio.
I absolutely read the resolution. Again, I'll repeat it. There's no greater friend of Israel in the White House ever in the history of the United States of America than Donald J. Trump. He's negotiating with these countries. We need to give him the latitude to negotiate with these countries. In terms of bipartisanship, go back through the record of the last 90 days and see the almost complete block voting on everything, including we have 2 votes coming up and another 2 votes at the end of the day. Let's see if there's one Democrat that doesn't vote in total unison with their party. Look at the Republican side. We are much more free thinkers, and we have differences of opinion. and that comes out when we vote. So when we talk about bipartisanship, I hope the Democrats get to a point where they're willing to work with us on common sense. I had a bill that I presented to the floor about 3 weeks ago. Here's what it said. If you come into this country illegally, you can't claim asylum. And if you do, you invalidate your right for asylum for life. And you must only claim asylum at a designated port of entry. This is a 90-10 issue. Democrats block that. Look, I want to work in a bipartisan manner. I think the American public demands that we do. But when every Democrat votes in total and complete lockstep with their leadership every single time to block any progress, we're going to be unable to do that. And with that, again, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
The senator from Nevada.
Thank you. I have to stand up here and just call my colleague out because he's trying to paint all the Democrats together. But if he would look at my record in standing independent from some of my party's votes and the fact that I think it is important and know it is important we work in a bipartisan way and have done just that in committee in my votes in a bipartisan way with my colleagues, I would hope that he would be open to working with me in the future on some bipartisan legislation. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from